When this email landed in my inbox, I had to read it 3 times just to process the sheer amount of cold-blooded deception and calculate how someone could even survive a betrayal of this magnitude. It involves a tech startup, a childhood bond completely ripped to shreds, a secret romance behind closed doors, and a calculated plot to literally steal a man's sanity and his entire life savings. This is the perfect story to just throw on in the background while you are gaming, getting some chores done around the house, or just winding down for the night, because the twist at the end is going to leave you absolutely speechless. I remember sitting in the absolute stillness of my living room, watching the freezing rain beat against the glass window pane while the clock on the wall loudly ticked past 3 in the morning. My hands were shaking so violently that the screen of my phone blurred as I stared at a live security feed broadcasting directly from my private executive suite at my own company. For the past 7 years of my life, I had poured every single drop of my energy, my passion, and my financial resources into building a software development firm called Apex Digital. I started this journey in a cramped, moldy garage, surviving on instant noodles and maxing out multiple credit cards just to afford the server space and pay my first 2 junior developers. I sacrificed my youth, my weekends, and my mental health to turn that struggling startup into a prominent enterprise that had recently attracted the attention of massive venture capitalists. My younger brother, Lucas, had been by my side for the last 3 of those years because I brought him into the company as the chief operations officer when he was drowning in personal debt and couldn't even afford his rent. I wanted to give him a fresh start, a respectable career, and a share of the wealth I was creating, because he was my family, and we had survived a brutal childhood together, protecting one another from the world. Around the same time, I met Evelyn, the woman I genuinely believed was my soulmate, and the person I was destined to grow old with. We had been dating for 2 years, and our engagement was the happiest moment of my life, with a massive winter wedding already locked in and planned down to the very last detail. I felt like the luckiest man alive because I had a multi-million-dollar business, a fiercely loyal brother, and a beautiful fiancée who seemed to love me for my heart rather than my bank account. But the absolute fragility of human trust is something you never truly understand until the people closest to you decide to sharpen their knives behind your back. It all started when our lead financial auditor brought a series of strange anomalies to my attention regarding our offshore server maintenance funds. Small increments of cash totaling roughly $30,000 a month were being wire transferred to an independent consulting firm based in Delaware that had zero operational history with our firm. When I initially questioned Lucas about these payments, he laughed it off as a simple administrative oversight connected to our new cloud migration strategy and told me to let him handle it because I was already overwhelmed with the upcoming venture capital negotiations. Because he was my brother and I loved him unconditionally, I trusted his word without a single second thought and completely dismissed the issue. But within a few weeks, the atmosphere in my own home began to shift into something cold and deeply uncomfortable. Evelyn started hiding her phone screen whenever I entered the room, and she would frequently receive urgent text messages late at night claiming they were just updates from the wedding decorators or her bridesmaids. Her behavior became increasingly erratic and defensive, and she suddenly insisted on knowing my personal passwords for our shared cloud drives and financial portfolios under the guise of wanting to help me organize our personal estate before the marriage. My gut instinct, which had never failed me in business, began screaming that something was fundamentally wrong, but I desperately tried to convince myself that I was just suffering from paranoia due to overwork and exhaustion. The true turning point arrived when I accidentally discovered a hidden encrypted folder on our main company server that had been created using an admin protocol only accessible by my brother. My curiosity turned into pure unadulterated terror when I managed to bypass the security wall and found a collection of drafted legal documents that made my blood run entirely cold. It was a fully prepared motion for emergency power of attorney and an involuntary psychiatric evaluation form filled out with my name on it. The documents alleged that I was suffering from severe cognitive decline, advanced paranoid delusions, and substance abuse, rendering me completely incapable of managing Apex Digital or making independent legal decisions. The paperwork was designed to strip me of my voting shares and transfer absolute operational control of the entire company over to Lucas and Evelyn. I sat at my desk for hours in complete silence, feeling the room spin around me as the horrifying reality began to settle into my chest. My brother and my fiancée were actively conspiring to legally declare me insane so they could hijack my life's work. I realized that a direct confrontation would be a massive mistake because they would simply destroy the digital evidence, gaslight me into doubting my own senses, and immediately accelerate their timeline before I could build a proper defense. I decided to play the part of the oblivious victim while launching a comprehensive counter-offensive. Over the weekend, when the office building was entirely empty, I secretly installed motion-activated high-definition spy cameras hidden inside functional wall clocks and USB wall chargers throughout my private office and the main executive boardroom. I also retained the services of an elite external forensic accounting firm to track every single transaction associated with that mysterious Delaware consulting company without notifying anyone on our internal team. 3 days later at 3 in the morning, the hidden camera application on my phone flashed a red notification alerting me to unauthorized movement in my private office. I opened the live video stream expecting to see a late night cleaning crew, but instead my eyes fell upon Evelyn walking into the dark room, shutting the door behind her and turning the deadbolt. A moment later, my brother, Lucas, stepped out from the adjoining private bathroom suite. I watched in absolute paralyzed horror as they locked into an intense, passionate embrace, kissing with a level of familiarity that proved this affair had been going on for a very long time. They sat down at my executive desk and opened my physical document safe using the combination that Lucas had obviously stolen from my personal files. As they tossed aside my sentimental family photos and personal journals to find the original corporate charter contracts, they began discussing their scheme with a chilling level of casual indifference. Evelyn looked at Lucas and told him that she couldn't stand pretending to love me for another single day, expressing how nauseating it was to smile at me and plan a wedding just to secure her legal right to my assets. Lucas laughed, brushed a strand of hair from her face, and assured her that the nightmare was almost over, because the corrupt psychologist he had bribed with $50,000 had already signed the preliminary emergency commitment order. They planned to present the psychiatric evaluation and the power of attorney paperwork to our board of directors and the primary venture capital investors during our annual high-profile charity gala, which was exactly 3 days away. They calculated that the immense public shock of the announcement, combined with the forged medical records, would force the board to instantly suspend my authority, allowing Lucas to assume control and immediately finalize a hostile sale of Apex Digital to a major competitor for $15 million before I could even find a lawyer to contest the evaluation. Listening to my own flesh and blood and the woman I poured my soul into loving discuss, destroying my life and locking me in a mental facility, as if they were discussing a simple real estate transaction, shattered something permanent inside my mind. The overwhelming sadness and heartbreak I felt vanished in an instant, replaced by a dark, freezing rage that crystallized my thoughts. I knew exactly what I had to do. Bro, I need to pause the story right here because my hands are literally sweating just reading this script out loud to you guys. Can you actually comprehend the absolute level of malice it takes to not only cheat on your brother with his future wife, but to literally plot to lock him away in a psych ward just to steal his business and his money? That is not just a standard relationship drama, that is straight up demonic behavior. But our viewer Liam did not break down or start crying. He decided to let them walk directly into the trap they built for him. Let's get right back into the story to see how the most legendary revenge of all time went down. The following morning, I walked into the office wearing a perfect mask of calm composure, greeting Lucas with a warm high five and even bringing Evelyn her favorite iced coffee when she arrived to assist with the gala invitations. It required every single ounce of my psychological endurance not to jump across the desk and ruin them right there, but I knew that true vengeance required absolute patience. Over the next 48 hours, my external forensic accountants hit the absolute jackpot, uncovering an undeniable digital trail showing that Lucas had systematically embezzled over $450,000 from our server funds directly into a secret bank account in the Cayman Islands registered under Evelyn's middle name and her mother's residential address. I took this mountain of financial evidence, along with the high-definition video and audio recordings from my hidden office cameras, and spent a long afternoon meeting with the district attorney and a team of white-collar crime detectives. The authorities were completely stunned by the sheer clarity of the evidence and agreed to execute a synchronized arrest strategy that would maximize the legal consequences for both of them. The night of the annual Apex Digital Charity Gala arrived, and the grand ballroom of the Omni Imperial Hotel was a sea of glittering crystal chandeliers, expensive silk dresses, and over 200 high-profile investors, journalists, corporate executives, and extended family members. Evelyn looked taking in an emerald green designer gown, and Lucas was mingling near the stage in a sharp, tailored tuxedo, drinking expensive champagne, and laughing with our primary board members, acting as if he was already the undisputed king of the industry. I could see them exchanging secret, arrogant smiles across the crowded room, completely confident that within the next hour my life would be completely ruined and I would be escorted out of my own event by medical personnel. I patiently waited for my cue, stepped up to the main podium, and adjusted the microphone to address the elite crowd for the annual keynote speech. I looked out at the audience, seeing my brother and my fiancée standing together near the front row, with Lucas tightly holding a leather portfolio containing the forged psychiatric documents he was getting ready to hand to our board chairman the absolute second I finished speaking. I took a deep breath, smiled into the microphone, and announced to the room that before we officially opened the presentation on our new software rollout, I wanted to share a deeply personal and unscripted look into the true inner workings and executive leadership of Apex Digital. I gave a slight nod to our head AV technician, who was fully briefed on the situation, and the massive projection screen behind me immediately flared to life. Instead of our corporate marketing reel, the high-definition footage from my hidden office camera illuminated the entire wall of the ballroom. The audio system, which was turned up to maximum volume, echoed through the silent hall, with terrifying clarity, capturing every single word of Evelyn admitting she despised me, and Lucas explaining how they were going to use a dirty doctor to lock me away in a mental institution to steal $15 million. The collective gasp from the 200 guests was like a physical shockwave hitting the room as the entire ballroom descended into a state of absolute breathless horror. I turned my head slightly to watch the immediate destruction of their universe. Evelyn dropped her crystal glass, which shattered into 1,000 pieces against the marble floor as her face drained of all color, turning into a sickly hollow mask of pure terror. Lucas froze entirely, his jaw dropping open as he stared at the screen, while the leather portfolio slipped from his paralyzed fingers, scattering the forged medical papers across the floor for everyone to see. The murmurs in the crowd instantly erupted into an absolute frenzy of outrage and disgust as our board members looked at them with utter loathing. I looked down from the podium directly into my brother's terrified eyes, spoke directly into the microphone, and told him that his operational strategy was incredibly creative, but his employment at this company was permanently terminated. Right on cue, the massive double doors at the entrance of the ballroom burst open, and 4 uniformed police officers, along with 2 federal fraud investigators, marched directly down the center carpeted aisle. They walked straight past the stunned guests, grabbed Lucas and Evelyn by their arms, forced them around, and slammed heavy silver handcuffs onto their wrists, right in front of the entire media and investor circle. Lucas completely lost his mind, screaming at me that I was a parasite, that he hated me, and that I was destroying his family, while Evelyn collapsed to her knees, sobbing hysterically, begging me to forgive her, and screaming that Lucas had manipulated her into the entire scheme. The officers dragged them out of the hotel through a gauntlet of flashing cameras from the journalists, who were frantically recording the entire public downfall. The legal and social destruction was total and absolute. Lucas was subsequently sentenced to 8 years in a maximum security facility for grand larceny, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit fraud, while Evelyn received 5 years for her direct involvement in the corporate theft and money laundering. The corrupt psychologist who accepted the bribe was stripped of his medical license permanently and is currently awaiting his own sentencing behind bars. Remarkably, Apex Digital did not suffer from the scandal because our investors were so incredibly blown away by my rapid, fearless execution of justice, and our stock valuation actually broke records the following week. I lost my only brother and the woman I planned to marry in the span of a single hour, but I protected my sanity, my freedom, and the legacy I built from nothing. I learned the hard way that the closest people in your life can sometimes carry the deadliest poison, but if you stay vigilant, you can make them drink it themselves. I am honestly completely speechless after reading through this submission, you guys. The absolute ice, cold discipline it takes to sit in the same room with your brother and your fiancé for days knowing they are trying to put you in an asylum and then completely destroying them in front of 200 people is just next level legendary status. Liam, if you are watching this video right now, you are an absolute king, and I hope your business continues to thrive without that toxic garbage in your life. What do you guys think about how this whole drama went down? Would you have confronted them privately in the office, or would you have pulled off the exact same public execution at the gala? Drop your thoughts in the comments section down below, because I love reading your reactions and seeing how you guys would handle these insane situations. This is a story about a woman who didn't just want a boyfriend, but wanted to completely dismantle a man's soul and replace his reality with a horror movie of her own making. We are talking about fake identities, professional actors hired to play family members, and a psychological trap that lasted over 1,000 days. If you think you have seen it all, just wait until you hear how this ended, because I have never read anything this calculated in my entire life. Grab your popcorn and lock your doors, because this is the story of Kamel and the woman he knew as Maya, but who turned out to be his worst nightmare. It all started at a high-end art gallery opening in the city centre, where Kamel was working as a junior curator and Maya walked in, looking like she had stepped out of a classic Noir film. She was elegant and spoke with a slight unidentifiable accent, and she told him she was a freelance architectural consultant from Switzerland who was in town for a 6-month project. For the first few months, the romance was an absolute whirlwind of luxury and intellectual stimulation as she took him to expensive dinners and talked about her childhood in the Alps and her strict but loving parents who were supposedly high-ranking diplomats. Kamel was completely swept off his feet because she was everything he had ever dreamed of, and she seemed to have this uncanny ability to know exactly what he was thinking before he even said it. Looking back now, he realizes that wasn't intuition, but the result of her having already spent months stalking his social media and hacking into his private cloud storage before they even met. The first red flag that Kamel ignored was when she moved into his apartment just 3 months after they met because her supposed corporate housing had a plumbing disaster. She didn't just bring clothes but brought an entire lifestyle change, and she slowly started replacing his furniture and his books and even his clothes, saying that she wanted him to look as successful as he truly was. She convinced him to delete his Instagram and Facebook because she claimed that her family's diplomatic status made them targets for kidnappers, and she didn't want his public profile to put her in danger. Kamel, being the protective guy he is, agreed without a second thought because he felt like he was guarding a princess. But then the isolation began to get aggressive as she started telling him that his best friend Marek had made a pass at her while Kamel was in the kitchen, and she cried for hours saying she felt violated in her own home. Kamel cut Marek off that night without even asking for his side of the story, and that was exactly what Maya wanted because Marek was the only person who had expressed doubt about her mysterious background. 6 months into the relationship, Maya organized a dinner so Kamel could finally meet her parents who were supposedly visiting from Bern. They met at a private room in a 5-star hotel, and the couple looked perfectly sophisticated, and they spoke about Swiss politics and international law with such authority that Kamel was completely intimidated. They gave him a gold watch as a welcoming gift and told him they were so happy Maya had found a stable man like him. It was the proudest moment of his life, but little did he know that those two people were actually out of work theatre actors she had found on a shady Craigslist ad and paid $5,000 to play the role for 4 hours. The watch was a high-quality replica she had bought on the black market. Maya was playing a game of chess while Kamel was barely playing checkers. She started gaslighting him about his memory shortly after that dinner by moving things in the house and then telling him he was becoming forgetful, or that he might be suffering from early onset dementia like his grandfather. She would record their arguments, but she would only start the recording after she had pushed him to the point of shouting so she could play it back to him the next day and show him how abusive he was becoming. He started to believe her, and he started taking medication for anxiety that she provided, claiming her father's doctor had prescribed them for her, but she thought he needed them more. In reality, they were heavy sedatives that kept him in a constant state of mental fog. The escalation reached a breaking point when Kamel lost his job at the gallery because of a series of anonymous tips sent to his boss, claiming he was stealing small artifacts. Kamel knew he was innocent, but the evidence was planted in his locker, and he was fired immediately. Maya was there to catch him, and she told him not to worry, because she would support him with her architectural salary. This gave her total financial control, and she took his credit cards and his bank access, saying she would manage their finances to save him from the stress. For an entire year, Kamel lived like a prisoner in his own home, while Maya went to work every day in a business suit. One day, Kamel's laptop, which he thought was broken, miraculously turned on while she was out, and he noticed a hidden folder that wasn't password protected. When he opened it, his entire world collapsed, because there were hundreds of folders labeled with his name and the names of his family members. There were photos of him from years before he met Maya, and there were receipts for payments to the actors who played her parents. There were even scripts she had written for their daily conversations, including notes on how to trigger his insecurities. He found out her real name wasn't Maya, but Agnieszka, and she wasn't from Switzerland, but from a town 20 miles away, and she had been obsessed with him since he gave a lecture at a local college 4 years ago. She had never been an architect, and she had spent her days sitting in a library or a park, just waiting for the time to come home and pretend she had been at an office. She had spent every cent of his savings to fund this theatrical production of a life. Kamel didn't confront her immediately because he was terrified, and he realized the medication she was giving him was making him weak. He waited until she went out for her fake job, and he packed a single bag and ran to the only person he could think of, which was Marek, his old best friend. Marek took him in, and they spent the next 48 hours going through the digital files Kamel had managed to copy onto a thumb drive. They found evidence that she had been planning to stage a fake pregnancy to trap him into a marriage that would allow her to claim his family's inheritance. When Agnieszka realized he was gone, she didn't just call him, but she sent a video of herself standing on a bridge saying that if he didn't come home in 30 minutes, she would jump, and it would be his fault. Kamel almost went back, but Marek held him down and called the police instead. When the police arrived at the bridge, they found her, but she wasn't jumping, she was just standing there, calmly smoking a cigarette, and she told the officers that Kamel had kidnapped her, and she had just escaped. She had even bruised her own arms to make it look real. It took a 6-month legal battle and the testimony of the actors she had hired, who finally cracked under pressure to prove that Kamel was the victim of an elaborate long con. She was eventually sentenced to psychiatric evaluation and probation for fraud and stalking, but the damage to Kamel's mind was already done. He found out later that she had done this to 2 other men before him, and she was a professional predator who specialized in total identity theft. I am honestly sitting here in absolute shock because I have read some crazy stories on this channel, but this is on a whole different level of insanity. The fact that she had the cold-blooded discipline to play a character for 3 years and hire actors just to fool him at a dinner is something out of a psychological horror movie. Kamel, thank you so much for having the courage to send this in, because I know how hard it must be to admit that you were tricked so deeply, but you need to know that this isn't your fault, because nobody is prepared to defend themselves against a professional con artist who treats a relationship like a military operation. To everyone watching, please understand that if someone tries to isolate you from your friends or starts making you doubt your own memory, that is not love. And it is not just a quirky personality trait, it is a massive emergency. Trust your gut and trust the people who have known you the longest, because they are the ones who can see the red flags when you are blinded by the romance. Kamel, I hope your recovery continues and that you find peace knowing that she can never hurt you again. Everyone, please leave a comment for Kamel and let him know he is not alone, and if you have ever dealt with someone who lived a double life, I want to hear about it, because we need to expose these people before they destroy anyone else. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next story, because trust me, things are only going to get more intense from here. Stay safe out there, and remember that sometimes the person sitting across from you at dinner might be a complete stranger playing a role. I will see you all in the next video.